Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Nichols, and I hope you're having a great Monday. Today is January 20th, 2020, and here in the United States, it's a holiday in remembrance of Martin Luther King Jr. And this holiday is used to remember Martin Luther King Jr. because he was a nonviolent activist here in the United States that played a major role in the civil rights movement. Now, granted, this holiday doesn't have a specific tie-in with MMA, but I was thinking, without Martin Luther King Jr., we may not even have black MMA fighters here in the United States. So I thought it would be fun to create a video of in my opinion, top 5 black MMA fighters that will win a UFC title sometime in their career. Now, I want to preface this with I'm ignoring fighters that already have had a title and lost it. For example, Daniel Cormier. I wanted to focus on fighters that have yet to get a UFC title, and my thoughts are they will I will count interim, I guess, but will at least get an interim or unified UFC title in their career. So before I go any further, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you would like as well. I'm sitting at 9. I only need one more to get to 10, so that'd be great. Anything you want to comment on the video, of course, throw it in the comments. So without further ado, let's move on to number 5 in my list. All right, kicking off my Martin Luther King Day top 5 black MMA fighters in the UFC who do not have a UFC title, as well as has not had a UFC title in the past. Let's start with number 5. In my opinion, number 5 fighter in the world in UFC, Corey Anderson. Let's talk about Corey Anderson a little bit, shall we? Corey Anderson, nickname Overtime, actually used to have a nickname that some may have liked a lot more, some thought was really dumb. 25-8. It's a play on 24/7. He was just one extra. It was cool, but Overtime's cool too. Anyways, Corey Anderson, age 30. So still in his prime. I feel like every time I see a Corey Anderson fight, I see him getting better and better each fight. It's not, the increase isn't really, really high, but I feel like his fighting style and his pace has a chance against Jon Jones. I know Jones, as of this recording, has a fight coming up with Dominic Reyes. And while Dominic Reyes definitely has a shot, I feel like Corey Anderson could give both Dominic Reyes and Jon Jones legit trouble. So Corey Anderson is 13-4. He has an upcoming fight, February 15th, 2020, which is actually 7 days after Jon Jones' next fight with Dominic Reyes. And Corey Anderson is set to fight against Jan Blachowicz. And I don't know if you guys know, some of us may know, or may not, but Corey won season 19 of The Ultimate Fighter. But what I wanted to specify was, if you look at Corey's record, he only had 3 professional MMA fights outside of the UFC. His 4th fight was the finale, and then he's been in the UFC. So he's been in the UFC since 2014, so 6 years now. And in those 6 years, he's only lost 4 times in the UFC. So he's what? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 4. So he's 10-4 just in the UFC. 6 years. And he fought in 2013 and then fought the finale. So in 1 year, he got into the UFC. To me, that's just crazy. He has a really good wrestling background. I think his style just gives troubles for a lot of the top players in the light heavyweight division in the UFC. So, and his previous win for Corey Anderson is Johnny Walker, and everybody was hyped on Johnny Walker, and Corey Anderson came in and shut that shit down. So, and he's already beaten Ilir Latifi. He's beaten Glover Teixeira, Pat Cummins. It was okay, but I mean, he lost OSP back in 2017. But as of late, Corey Anderson's game has stepped up quite a bit, and I look forward to seeing how Corey does against Juan. And I mean, think about it. If this is 7 days after the Jon Jones and Dominic Reyes fight, looking at the UFC rankings, there's not much up there at the top anymore, especially if Jones beats Dominic Reyes. Corey Anderson could have a legitimate shot at the light heavyweight title. So that is my number 5 for black MMA fighters in the UFC. Let's move on to number 4. All right, number 4 on my list for a black MMA fighter in the UFC that will get a title in their career is Jared Cannonier. Let's talk about Jared Cannonier a little bit, shall we? Jared Cannonier, nicknamed the Killer Gorilla. He is currently 35 years old. And Jared Cannonier, I'm kind of biased. I like Jared a lot. Jared is a beast, number 1. Number 2, he mainly started in Alaska Fighting Championship. And I watched a lot of AFC on Fight Pass with me and my friends. So it was really cool to see a fighter from Alaska Fighting Championship move to the UFC. As you can see here down in his amateur fights were both in AFC, as well as I think he had 4 AFC fights before moving into the UFC. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 fights in AFC before getting his first fight in the UFC on January 2015. And what's also cool about Jared Cannonier is he not only went from AFC to the UFC, but he started at heavyweight in the UFC. And he's went from heavyweight to light heavyweight, and then now he's at middleweight. And you don't see many fighters move divisions that much. The only other fighters I could really think of is, I want to say maybe BJ Penn. I can't remember if BJ Penn did 3 divisions. Obviously, we see Conor moving up from featherweight to lightweight, and then now he's doing welterweight, and then possibly going to lightweight, who knows. But the only other person I could really think of off the top of my head would be Frankie Edgar, going from lightweight to featherweight, now bantamweight. He's going to try to dip his toes in there. But while it's crazy to think about fighters moving multiple divisions like that, I don't know if I can think of anybody else that started at heavyweight and moved down. Think about it. When fighters get to heavyweight, they get so comfortable not cutting weight that they're like, we won't, heavyweight's for me. And Jared went from heavyweight, and I should look up what his heaviest weight was for Jared, but he went from obviously being over 225 to then down to 205 and then down to 185. So over his career, he's at least moved 40 pounds to compete in the UFC. So in my mind, that's pretty crazy. Obviously, he had some setbacks in some of the other weight divisions, like obviously his first fight here in the UFC, he fought Sean Jordan, again being a heavyweight, and lost that. And then by the time he was at light heavyweight, he fought Glover Teixeira. He lost against Glover Teixeira. Also at Jan Blachowicz and Dominic Reyes. And then now, again, moving down to middleweight, he's had 3 fights thus far, with those being all wins against David Branch, who's not in the UFC anymore, Anderson Silva. Everybody knows Mr. Anderson Silva, and then he just beat Jack Hermanson in September, and that fight was really good. Man, Jared is working his way up, and I really feel like he could get a definite title at middleweight. He could give those middleweights a real big problem. As you can see here, UFC 248, he's supposed to be having a fight, and he was scheduled to fight Robert Whitaker. Whitaker had to pull out. We don't exactly know why yet, but then Darren Till, the other gorilla nickname, he was supposed to fight Jared Cannonier, and now Darren Till is out. So it looks like as of right now, because you can see on the UFC 248 card, he was supposed to fight Whitaker. They haven't updated Whitaker's picture to remove the belt yet, but that was supposed to be the bout. But so now sounds like Jared's kind of in the wind, waiting for another option at middleweight to fight. So hopefully UFC gets Jared a good fight. It's March. The event is in March, and it's only January, so they still got 2 months to figure it out. So I'm not too worried, but Jared is doing really well in the middleweight, and I look forward to seeing him progress in the rankings. So that was my number 4 on my MLK Day MMA list of black MMA fighters in the UFC. Let's move on to number 3. Okay, number 3 on my list of my MLK Day black MMA fighters in the UFC that will get a title in their career is Kevin Lee. Let's talk about Kevin Lee a little bit. So Kevin Lee, nicknamed the Motown Phenom, he was from Detroit, Michigan. He came up through wrestling. That's his background. He's only 27 years old. I know a lot of people have been kind of counting out Kevin Lee recently, but In my opinion, Kevin Lee's fighting style is so daunting. In my opinion, the pressure and his style is just every fighter Kevin Lee goes up against, I always look into them and seeing like, can they deal with Kevin Lee's style and his pressure and his fighting ability? Because I feel like Kevin Lee is such a great fighter. And now with him being with Firas Zahabi up at TriStar, I really hope that's the cherry on top of what Kevin Lee needs to get to where I think he should be. I mean, obviously he's a like top 10 lightweight. I feel like that dude could easily be top 5, and I don't know if he'll beat Khabib, but I feel like he has the tools to beat a lot of those fighters. In the top 5, Khabib, I'm not sure. But if anybody else beats Khabib, I feel like he could probably beat them. Like he had a legitimate shot against Tony Ferguson. Maybe the staph infection definitely could have weighed him down on that. Who knows how the rematch would go with him being healthy. Granted, of course, all fighters aren't always healthy when they go to fight. But anyways, again, obviously he fights at lightweight. He did take a little dip into welterweight. We'll talk about that in a second. So he's 18-5 in the UFC. Let's see, when was his first fight in the UFC? 2014. So he's been in the UFC for 6 years now. And look at this. First fight in the UFC. Hey, let's fight Al Iaquinta for my first fight. You know, crazy. And then he lost to Al again. So he's 0-2 against Al. But looking at his wins, I mean, it's a good win-loss record here in the UFC. Now, last couple fights, and this was after these two fights, that's where everybody was kind of questioning Kevin Lee. He lost to Al Iaquinta in the main event, and that went to decision, and then he was like, okay, screw it, let's go to welterweight. He went and fought RDA and did not do well against RDA at welterweight. So I think he made the correct decision to go back to 155. Now, if there's a 165 division, I'd like to see Kevin Lee there, but of course, unfortunately, in the world we live in, for some reason, Dana White is super against 165. But he went back down to 155 and fought Gregor Gillespie and KO'd him in round number 1. And so many people were hyped up on Gregor Gillespie, which is understandable. Gregor Gillespie is a beast, and he's gonna be back. But Kevin Lee went in there, put it on him, and so Kevin Lee, I feel like he definitely has a legitimate shot to get a title before the end of his career at getting UFC gold. Now, Kevin does have a fight lined up on March 14th. Looks like he's going to be fighting good old Charles Oliveira. And Oliveira, I want to say he's on a hot streak right now. I want to say he's on a 6-fight win streak. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, he's on a 6-fight win streak. So this is going to be a great fight. Great fight for Kevin Lee, just to kind of keep him active, keep him get more wins in the win column lightweight. Get more experience over at TriStar. Work with, I assume he's working with Rory as well. And yeah, I'm super hyped on Kevin Lee, and I look forward to seeing how his career pans out in the lightweight division moving forward. Okay, so my number 2 might surprise you, but let's move on to my number 2 in the list. Number 2 on my MLK Day list of black MMA fighters in the UFC that would get a title sometime in their career is Breanna Van Buren. Some of you may or may not know who Breanna is, and I'm going to enlighten you. Breanna Van Buren, nicknamed The Bull. She is 26 years old. She's only 4'11", and she fights in the strawweight division in the UFC. She currently trains at American Kickboxing Academy, which is obviously very good. And right now, she only has 1 win in the UFC. Now, let me back up my reasoning as to why she's number 2. I've been watching MMA for a long time. I can't even honestly describe when I initially started. It's been so long, and I feel like I had, just from my experience of watching MMA, I watch obviously professional MMA on TV. I've watched professional MMA in person. I've watched amateur MMA on TV, as well as I watch amateur MMA in person. I've watched a lot, and there's some fighters you see where you can tell you're like, they're gonna do big things. When I watch Breanna fight in the strawweight division, I feel like I'm watching a future champion. I know some people may not feel that way. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. I don't really know her or anything, so there's nothing that's really, I have nothing to stand on outside of that. But just watching her technique, watching her pressure that she puts on women when she fights them, it's like it's insane. So a little bit of backstory. I saw her fight in person. You can see here on record, the Invicta FC Phoenix Rising Series. If you're not sure what that is, Invicta, which is has its home base here in Kansas City where I live, so I go to a lot of the Invicta events to kind of get to see what women will be in the UFC, because it's, let's face it, it's basically a feeder league into the UFC for women, and which isn't a bad thing, don't get me wrong. It's great because we get great talent into the UFC and they get experience before going to the UFC. And that's what I see with Breanna. She was in the Phoenix Rising Series, which is what it was, a one-day tournament in strawweight. And how they did that, because, of course, a lot of the commissions in the UFC don't want fighters to be in a one-day tournament. So they were able to work around it by the tournament. I want to say, was it 8 fighters altogether? And the first round of the tournament, you only fought 1 round. And then the next round, you fought 1 round, and then you'd be in the, so that'd be the semifinals, and then the finals was just a normal 3-rounder, and she won that tournament on that day, and that was May 2019, and she did so good. Like, the first fight of the night, she got a submission, and then her second fight, which again was 1 round, won a decision unanimously. And then then the third fight for the finale, she won via submission in round 2 against Kailin Curran. And Kailin Curran used to be in the UFC as well. She's already beat a couple UFC fighters before even getting into the UFC. She beat Jamie Moyle as well as Kailin Curran before getting into the UFC. And I feel like Breanna is such a beast. It's probably crazy to have her on my number 2, but I feel like just keep giving her experience, her training at AKA. I feel like she's going to do big things. I'm putting my foot in the ground on this. I'm really going to be following her career because I think she does so well in a strawweight. There's so many killers, but I feel like she could get up there and use her power and use her pressure to win that strawweight title. So for me, that's my number 2 on my list of black MMA fighters that will get a UFC title in their career. So let's move on to my number 1. My number 1 on my list for my MLK Day black MMA fighters that will get a UFC title in their career and who hasn't had one is Francis Ngannou. Let's talk about Francis, shall we? Because to me, Francis is a scary, scary man. I don't know who on the planet that follows MMA doesn't think Francis is, number 1, scary, number 2, able to get a title in the UFC. He fights at heavyweight. As you can see here, his weight 259 pounds, basically 260, only 5 pounds off of the cutoff for the weight limit, and he's only 33, which is young for heavyweights in the UFC. Nicknamed the Predator. He only has 3 losses. He's 14-3. And looking at Francis's fights, he's been fighting in the UFC since 2015. And if you look at his record in the UFC, it's all TKOs. He's got 1 submission here. Does he have any other submissions? No, just that one, and then he has some outside of the UFC. And in all these fights in the UFC, round 1, 2, 2, 2, round 1, 1, 1, 1, and then he fought Stipe. Now, that's the only knock on Francis is, well, I guess it could be 2 things. 1, he couldn't keep up with, obviously, Stipe's wrestling because of Stipe's wrestling background. But also let's be real, Francis got tired. That's the only thing is, while Francis is a beast, the knock on him is I feel like he needs a little more time in the cage. I feel like Francis is such a beast in round 1. Once you can get past round 1, I feel like your percentage of defeating him is so much greater. Obviously, the Derek Lewis fight kind of has left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths about that. I can understand. Francis talked about it after the Derek Lewis fight, and how he was a little gun shy after fighting Stipe, and he was worried. Maybe if down the line, if they make that rematch between Derek and Francis, hopefully they're both in a different state of mind, in a different state in their career, where we'll see more action in that fight. But since then, I mean, Francis has had 3 fights: Curtis Blades, Cain Velasquez, and JDS. JDS and Cain Velasquez, they had 3 crazy fights back in the day, and he just smoked them both in this first round on their own, and then smoked Curtis Blades a second time in round 1 as well. And Curtis, because he fought Curtis Blades back in 2016 and beat him in round 2, whereas here he beat him in round 1. It's just, I was telling because this past weekend was the Conor and Cerrone fight, and I told my coworkers and friends that aren't as familiar with MMA, I told them that, in my opinion, Conor McGregor is the best round 1 MMA fighter we've ever seen up to this point. Because the moment the ref claps their hands, it is just like a tornado that is coming at you with Conor. In my opinion, number 2 is Francis Ngannou. The dude thinks that there's only one round in these fights. The dude is just constantly finishing people in round 1. And as you can see here, Francis does have another fight coming up on March 28th, and he is fighting Mr. Rozenstruik. And Mr. Rozenstruik had a crazy fight, was it last month or the month before? And he was fighting Alistair Overeem. And what was it, like 5 seconds left? He hit him with a right hand and like busted open Alistair's head, lip, and Alistair like hit the cage, and that was the end of the fight. It was insane. And so now, yeah, you get a knockout like that in a fight like that against Alistair Overeem. Here you are punching a ticket now to fight Francis Ngannou. So it's going to be a crazy fight. I feel like Francis, with his experience, is going to be able to take it. And I don't know how you deny Francis a title shot. Maybe not after this fight, because Mr. Rozenstruik, I don't even think he's ranked in the UFC. But the rumor is, from what I've heard, is Stipe should be fighting Daniel Cormier. But I think Stipe is out in injury, so that might take a bit. But then after that, whoever wins between that, if Daniel Cormier wins the heavyweight title, supposedly he'll retire either way. But if he wins the title, what's going to happen? Is he just going to retire, and then what? Are we just going to hand it back to Stipe? Like, how's that going to work? Maybe we'll have a unification bout again between Francis and Stipe. I don't know. But if Stipe beats against Daniel Cormier and Francis beats Mr. Rozenstruik, maybe it'll be round number 2 for Francis, because I don't know how you deny that guy a title shot. I'm telling you what, I feel like he's going to learn from that fight with Derek Lewis and definitely Stipe, and he's going to come back way better. And in my opinion, he's 100% going to get a UFC heavyweight title in his career. It's just he needs to work back up to it, and I feel like he's almost there. He's almost knocking on the door as it is to get that UFC gold. So with that is my top 5 black MMA fighters in the UFC that I think, in my opinion, will get UFC gold in their career before they retire. Now, I came up with 5, but I did have some extras that there's some obvious ones that I'm sure you guys are like, wow, are they not in your top 5? That I wanted to mention, so let's talk about those. Okay, so moving on to the honorable mentions. Number 1, Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero, I could see definitely being on a lot of people's lists, possibly number 1 over Francis. But Yoel has had already 3 title shots. 2 of those 3 he's missed weight, number 1. And then number 2, 2 of the 3, 2 of them were against Robert Whittaker. He lost both of those. And then the third one, he did win, but it was against Luke Rockhold, but he'd missed weight, so he wasn't eligible to get the interim belt at that time. And again, you're saying, Brian, how is he not your number 1? He literally has a next fight as of this moment. His next fight is for the title against Israel Adesanya. In my opinion, while Yoel Romero is a beast, I really don't think Yoel is going to beat Izzy. I feel like Yoel, he's not going to do his wrestling. He doesn't do that. He's going to stand up and strike with Izzy, which is not a good idea in my opinion. And Izzy, with his feinting, with his style of kickboxing, with his setups, I feel like Yoel is going to do what Yoel does. He's gonna block so much, and then try to swing. Izzy's just going to make him miss, and he's just going to nail him for it. So I feel like Yoel could get a belt, maybe not a middleweight. I don't know if he could do light heavyweight though. The dude's jacked. I don't know. if middleweight wasn't so stacked, especially with Izzy at the reins right now with the gold, maybe UL would have a shot. But right now, I just don't foresee him getting it anytime soon, especially in the fight against Izzy. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like Izzy's going to take that. All right, another honorable mention. We have, how am I forgetting his name? It's Aljamain Sterling. Sorry about that. Aljo. He was actually supposed to be fighting for the title. Was it this past year? And I think Aljo got hurt, so he couldn't fight. I would assume he would be the next fight for Cejudo at bantamweight. But I think if I heard the rumors correctly, I think the UFC is trying to make Jose Aldo and Cejudo. So if that's the case, Aljamain Sterling could definitely be next, and I could definitely see Aljo getting against. I feel like Aljo has better chances against Cejudo than Jose, because Jose's takedown defense is godlike, and he's just so fast with his strikes. Where Cejudo, I feel like his wrestling obviously is insane, but I feel like Aljo could give him real problems. Another honorable mention. Here we have Marion Renault. I've been kind of watching her a lot. I know she took a couple L's recently, but at bantamweight, I feel like it's starting to. Amanda Nunes is just clearing the slate at bantamweight, and I feel like Marion, she's a little older compared to some of the other fighters at bantamweight, but she is so fucking tough. It's insane. Like, some of her fights, I'm like, damn, how is she going to come back and win this? Like, or how is she going to beat this chick? And she just always pulls through. Not always, because she has had a couple losses, but all the fights that I've seen, even the ones she lost, were just super tough fights. And I don't want to put my foot in the ground saying she 100% will get a belt before she's done, only because she is a little older and she's a little behind compared to some of the other UFC fighters, but I feel like she still has a legitimate shot. Against Amanda Nunes, possibly not, but if Amanda Nunes, I'm assuming she might retire soon, because I don't know who else is left for her at the very top. If Amanda takes off and then the division starts, getting a refresh, I feel like Marion could definitely get a shot at the gold. So she's so tough, man. That's why she's definitely on my honorable mentions. Sadiq Youssef is another honorable mention of mine. Sadiq actually just fought this past weekend on the Donald Cowboy Cerrone and Conor McGregor card, and had a great fight against Andre Touchy-Feely. And he's such a beast. Like, his power is you can't deny his power in the division, and he's definitely somebody that I've been keeping an eye on. And even my coworkers, friends that were over for the Conor fight, I told them, keep an eye on this dude in this fight. When I was telling them like what the fights were on the card, we got to that fight on the card, and it definitely delivered. So Sadiq is definitely a great fighter to keep on top of, which is why I have him on my honorable mentions. I feel like it's going to take a while for Sadiq. I feel like he's just starting in his UFC and overall MMA career. He's got a ways to go, but maybe down the line definitely could have a shot at the gold. And last but not least, this might be a surprise to some of you as well, Angela Hill. I know Angela Hill has her ups and downs. She's been in the UFC. She was in the Ultimate Fighter originally, got in the UFC, and then she got cut, and then she came back to the UFC, and she's currently still in the UFC. And her fighting style, she doesn't put a lot of girls away, which is, I feel like, the one knock I have against her. But I feel like her speed and her techniques in the UFC, in the strawweight division, are so good. Like, there was a fight she had, I can't think of it off the top of my head. I should have looked it up beforehand. But her fight was insane, where it was just such a back and forth. I think it was 3 rounds. And I want to say it won the fight of the night that night. So Angela Hill, really good. Can she get gold? I'm not 100% sure, but I like her chances, especially at strawweight. And with that, that is the end of my video for today. Again, this was my MLK Day top 5 black MMA fighters in the UFC that'll get gold sometime in their career, in my opinion. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. This is something fun I thought I'd do on the side for today in remembrance of Martin Luther King Jr. If you had a day off today, I hope you enjoy it. If you're working, I'm sorry. I got to stay home today. So with that, again, like the video if you like it. Leave a comment if you like as well as, hey, again, like I said, I'm at 9 subscriptions. If you want to give me one more subscribe, I'll be at 10. So with that, I think I will leave, let's see, it's going to be on this side. I think I'll leave a button up in the top right for you guys to click to actually subscribe to my video. And then on the other side, on the left side, I'll have my latest video on the top. And then I think some of the relevant video down below that I created. Other than that, hope you have a great rest of the week. I should have probably another video this week as well. I'm hoping to review maybe one of the cards that are coming up this week. I think AFC is this week as well. So anyways, have a good rest of the day, and see you next time. Peace.